So let's get started. So first thing I must tell you, I'm normally a solutions guy. I try to figure out how do you fix a problem. But this subject has been consciously structured to say why is it so difficult, which means it's more a problem identification. I'm hoping that when we get into the conversation and the discussion, we will get into looking for solutions and the like in terms of what we could do, or we could do even another session focused on solutions. So initially, I really think as it's important for us to understand why, despite all our frustration, our shouting, and the like, the place is likely to get worse, unlikely to get better. So, and that will, so the context I'm providing is to understand that. From there, one needs to figure out what one can do. And it's not necessary that my points are necessarily fully exhaustive. So I'm sure I might miss some points and others can add to it. So let's start. So the starting point really is we have a constitutional birth defect. Ram is here, so it's appropriate that I start with the Constitution. So at the birth of the Constitution, the defect that we have is while the Constitution clearly spells out that you have the central government and the state government as tier 1, tier 2, central list, state list, concurrent list. When it comes to the third tier of government within courts, you are actually, they've referred to it as local bodies. So essentially in the initially structuring of this whole thing, the third tier was in some way ignored and felt and it has been neglected and has ended up as being a vassal of the state government. So there's a constitutional birth defect. This is doubly sad when you take a particular fact. In pre-independence India, in terms of under the British, etc., what's common among Rajaji, Rajendra Prasad, Subhash Chandra Bose, Nehru, Sardar Patel, all of them cut their teeth at the municipal town level. So whether it was Rajaji in Salem or Nehru in Allahabad, etc., they cut their teeth in local government before going on to higher posts in let's say state and even national level, obviously. But we miss the plot by not empowering the third tier despite having such kind of leaders, and that is a price that we are paying to this date. Now to fix this problem, and initially I'll deal with all the structural points. To fix this problem, during Rajiv Gandhi's government, which had, it was a majority which could have passed any constitutional amendment that they wanted, they passed what is called the 73rd Constitutional Amendment and the 74th Constitutional Amendment. The 73rd deals with the rural areas and the 74th deals with the urban areas. The 73rd is pretty good in terms of the devolution of powers, Jilla Parishad, Gram Panchayat and the like. The 74th is seriously flawed. It's not worth the paper it is written on, though civil society does use it to say you're not doing the MPC, which is required, the Metropolitan Planning Committee that's required under the 74th, but it is seriously flawed. And it's an irony of history. The 73rd was crafted by Bhurelal in the IS, in the government, who was VP Singh's right-hand man, and VP Singh was no friend of Rajiv Gandhi. And the 74th was crafted by K.C. Sivaramakrishnan, a fine intellectual and a phenomenal person who was, in a sense, Rajiv Gandhi's blue-eyed boy. So you actually ended up in a situation where the 74th, which was given to someone who could have delivered. And I've heard, KCS has been a house guest, and he has admitted, he's no more, and he's really, absolutely outstanding person in the urban space and done a lot of work in urban Calcutta and the like. He said, we messed up in the way we envisaged the 74th. And consequently, the construct they made for 74th is no fix for the original constitutional defect. So as a result of which, cut to today, and in the context of Bangalore, what does it mean? It just means that the status quo continues. And the status quo continues means that, as I mentioned earlier, the city, the local city, can't even call it a city government, but represented in the election that happens to the BBMP, which is not fully Bangalore. More things happen outside BBMP than within BBMP for a Bangalore citizen. We'll come to that. There is a mayor who has a 1 year term who we are supposed to call him the worshipful, him or her the worshipful mayor. But there is nothing worth worshipping out there because the thing is they are an emasculated mayor in the system. The city is in the grips of the state. And if you give chief ministers of the state a choice between governing Bangalore versus governing the state, they will take Bangalore because this is also the cash cow in more ways than one. So you have a situation where nobody is clearly in charge, and the city is definitely not in charge of its own destiny. So our fate lies elsewhere. If I define destiny that there's somebody who's in charge, elected, that's what I mean. I'm not saying the state government was not elected, but the state government is meant for the entire state, and there are a whole lot of other legislative functions, etc., of the state that is required. And at the same time, we have the MLAs in the city who are very keen to do all this kind of stuff in the city and the power that it gives them over the corporator. So the third structural defect, so this is the reality. So in terms of what happens, but there is a huge structural defect that still exists in our current structure. As I mentioned, more than half the things are outside BBMP. So it's BWSSB, BESCOM, the BMTC, the BMRCL, the police. There are so many agencies which are outside the remit of BBMP. BBMP is not Bangalore. I mean, BBMP is one arm, and this happens to be the one with an election, and the rest are what are called parastatals. So what has happened over a period of time, and so the justification is BBMP doesn't have the competence to handle water and sewage. Okay, create a separate body. BBMP is not able to manage transport. Bombay, for example, the BMC manages the transport through BEST. Can't manage, let BMTC be a separate corporation. BWSSB is a separate government. So you start cutting, the latest one being a solid waste management authority because they can't deal with garbage management. So you have these kind of dysfunctional setups that are coming up. And the problem with parastatals and everybody else other than the BBMP is they are answerable to no one but to their own board. So there is nothing like you may want. I mean, the way it works is even if the entire city of 11 million says, okay, guys, let's just go and do the water project in North Bangalore and nothing else for the next 1 year, BWSSB has the power to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to listen to you. I will do what I want to do. And there's nothing you can do about it. So they are not answerable to anyone. So if you want anything done in the city, invariably anything you touch, I mean, barring getting maybe a birth certificate or a death certificate, which is with one agency. But let's say you want better roads. You want to move faster through the city. You want to be safer as you move faster through the city. Any of these things, even the water supply, because it goes through cuts across multiple agencies. It will, if you're going from here to the airport, you will have the BBMP, part of it will be the BDA, part of it will be that SPV which runs the toll road, and part of it will be some Bayappa area, just on roads. And then there are various jurisdictions. So anything you touch has multiple agencies involved. But nothing about our government is structured to knock the heads together to get an outcome. So if you see government announcements, they'll always be saying 5,000 crores for this water project, 7,000 crores for that metro, whatever. It's all some crores which don't make any sense. The language of outcomes are by and large not spoken by anyone. Not only in Bangalore, it's national malaise. And if you want outcomes, you have to have an arrangement to be able to knock heads of agencies to do it, which means you need a czar for mobility. If you want mobility solutions, it includes being able to walk on footpaths, it includes cycle, it includes metro, it includes buses, it includes cars, autos, everybody. You have to be able to work all these guys to get what you want, which is to travel faster, more safely tomorrow compared to today. But who can do that? I mean, we've been talking about mobility kind of authority for the longest time just to knock heads. Now there is talk after some 25 years making some noise about that we will get around there. So we are lacking what I would call these integration structures across these various people. And consequently, each of these agencies are designed as silos designed to withstand a nuclear attack. They are hugely territorial. They will say, get off my park. The horticulture department will say, carbon park is mine, get lost. You might have some great other plans and other stuff, but this is mine. You have no locus standi here. Even let's say when tourism wants to do something, they'll say, get out of my park. This is mine. So that's the nature of behavior you see. So consequently, unless you have a structural arrangement which can get these agencies together to listen to somebody clearly and do what's required, whether it be road cutting and filling and whatever, etc., or where the projects are taken up, we are not going to see progress. And if you're going to have such a structure to get these people to listen to you, you have to control the money. Just putting somebody at an additional chief secretary level is not going to do it. All money flow that goes to these agencies has to go through this body where people listen to who controls the budget. So you say that if you don't do what we're supposed to do in terms of coordination, you will not get your next allocation of money. That language they understand. We have never got around to doing it. You'll only see announcements from time to time saying this coordination committee is going to be set up or that coordination committee is going to be set up. So structurally, I would say these are the big ones without which the delivery side of what I'll come to competency and other issues in the politico-administrative second phase. But structurally, I would say the original constitutional defect, the 74th not working, and not having these agencies for integration and the like is something that is fundamentally a problem out here. Related to this, in terms of when you talk about structure, you need a mix of what I spoke about integration is integration across agencies. At the same time, you need deep decentralization to the lowest citizen level, ward and even lower than the ward if possible. What I call the deep decentralization. There's something called the subsidiarity principle in city working. You do things which are best done at the lowest possible level. If you can't do it at the lowest possible level, take it to the next level, then take it to the highest level is the way it's supposed to. So just as a simple example, and if you take garbage, the rule really is garbage must be decentralized to the local level, segregated, processed, and managed in the neighborhood. It mustn't go to a village. Morally, I don't know what each of us will go when we meet our maker that at the final hour, because we are thinking nothing about the waste of garbage of 11 million people being dumped in a village of 5,000 and spoiling their groundwater and their level forever. So you need to do waste at the lowest level, garbage for example, while transportation is invariably across the world a mega regional level solution. So you can't do transport solution at the ward level for a metro station. You tend to plan that at a much higher level. So we lack that. And then of course there's this bugbear about citizen participation. We have something called a citizen participation law. But the reality of that law is, even if the entire ward of 40,000 people decided that they want the 5 lakh rupees available to be done on this park, all the 40,000 people actually meet and say this is the park we want to do, the corporator can veto it and say, sorry, I don't believe this should be done, I believe that should be done. Game over. Now, why would citizens participate if at the end of the day, it is going to have this kind of veto power? I mean, this is the law. This is the law the way it is written. So that's another. Now, moving from there to my second leg. So the first one really are the structural challenges. The second one is the politico-administrative issues out here. Competence. Our competence levels in government, I mean, for those of us, I remember after doing the BATF, I told Nandan, that was around the time the Men in Black movie was there. I said, is there a way that we can all get zapped? Because what we have seen, the aliens that we have seen within government departments and the system, and how hollow that place is, one wanted to be just zapped of having ever seen it and go back to my placid, couldn't be bothered kind of life earlier. It's that bad. We talk about competence. For the longest time, and for the life of me, I don't even know who the chief town planner right now is. But I know that for the longest time, decades, the chief town planner in Bangalore did not have a degree in town planning. Forget about degree, diploma. Did not attend. I mean, all said and done, these are sciences. It has some principles of town planning, of thing. And you miraculously expect this whole thing to develop in a manner. Now the law requires that if you're going to have lakes and thing, you need people qualified in environmental engineering. That wasn't the case earlier. So you had all kinds of people managing all kinds of things way beyond their pay grade and way beyond their competence. So competence is a huge problem. And when you see the potholes, wattholes, etc., various things that you see, a lot of it is related to the capacity and competence, but that is not the only reason. Which brings me to the next C, which is corruption. Now, corruption is so endemic, so endemic. We are taking it that it's a given. And it's true of many countries, many places. But the quantum, I mean, this thing about there's a thing for every person's need, but not greed kind of stuff. It's really one of the key reasons why the city is the way it is. This is not my figure. When we did the BBMP restructuring, I used to ask every MLA and corporator who came to the committee saying, what's your estimate of the leakage in civic projects? And the consensus estimate was between 50 to 60% of the project size was leaking, which includes ghost jobs. We can talk about that later. Recently, I've seen in the papers about 2-3 months ago, the elected officials itself openly admitting that 40% is a given. So there's a floor of 40% corruption on projects established, and we all seem to be okay with it, that this is how it will work. But what does 40% really mean? Which means if a road tar has to be 2 inches, you will get 1 inch. That's what it means. Something has to give. Of course, there's a very fine-tuned mechanism there. We can get into details of how you start a tender at X, and then you give cost escalation and make it X plus Y into another figure. There's a very fine-tuned way to fix this whole, to get the money out of the system, because they understand projects, which is why you will see project announcements government will never worry about, because there's a well-honed mechanism to take money out of projects in terms of this thing. So corruption, according to me, is a huge malaise, and I liken it to this actually, and it is also linked to the short-term outlook of the people who come in. When you get elected, whether it be a corporator, whatever level you get elected in, this is my own theory of this whole thing, and I'll try and bring in a Chinese comparison as a point of view, and obviously you all can all free to disagree with me later. You get elected with fishing rights to a pond. This business that people who are getting into government there may be some good people and some good exceptions. I'm not saying no. But I think the majority are not getting in for public service. It's another business line. You could become an entrepreneur, you could run a restaurant, and you could do this. So it is return on investment. And that is really what is driving this. So when you get elected with fishing rights to a pond. Now, when you get fishing rights to a pond, you furiously fish. Over a period of time, the pond gets toxic, gets this thing, etc. The extraction of yield out of that pond is low. Now, normally you think like a management graduate, which I unfortunately happen to be. You say, I got rights of a pond. How can I make the pond into a lake, the lake into a river? So that as the place expands, market expands, even if I take a smaller fishing right of a larger place, I will still get a decent money. But development happens, because I'm seeing the pond becoming lake to river as symbols or metaphors for development. But there's a problem in people allowing that to happen. Because of the short-term nature which I get elected to, I want that return in that first 2-3 years, because then again I get back into some kind of campaign mode. And I therefore don't think long-term. But more importantly, and this is my hypothesis, given the anti-incumbency and what happens, my competitor is going to inherit the lake which I created. I will not be there to fish in the lake. So better I fish in the pond and leave a toxic pond for the next guy than make it into a lake and be sitting outside watching him or her fish in the lake. So there's a kind of a very perverted incentive to let things be. While in China, what they've really done in a very simplistic way is gone from this pond, lake, river from an overall development context. Because from day 1 to day 100, they know that the Communist Party will always be in control. So since they know that politically they are going to be in control, the merits of making it a larger place grows to the party. Here, because we have this, we can get into what's the solution for this. I'm a believer that proportional representation is a better way. Only for one reason. Loot is happening. You might as well distribute the loot so that they at least think in terms of lake and river as opposed to the current model that we have got. So corruption is another very big problem apart from the competence when you come to the politico-administrative thing. You look at the government tendering system. Forget about the lowest bid and thing. It is, a lot of them are rigged. you know, you'll find things that have gone horribly wrong, but the guy who was behind the tender, nothing will happen to him because they followed due process. So the whole focus is I'm following due process while you end up getting lemons. And when it comes to tendering and contract, particularly in the city, it is very difficult to find out where the corporator ends, the contractor begins, and maybe the MLA connects into the system. You know, like another politician in the north said once, "ये सब मिले जुले हैं." वो मिले जुले हैं only. You don't know where they have, who's fitted where, etc. So it's almost a kind of a continuum, and therefore this corruption is another very important malaise that we cannot lose sight of. Sorry, let me just see my remaining points. I have, and also the time. I'm sorry, I'm slightly out of time, but I'll try and finish quicker. The other thing really is it's a specialized area. We don't have the specialized people, and very archaic laws. I mean, the classic one is the Contract Carriage Act, which makes BMTC a monopoly. If you think about the bus service historically, it is fixed buses in the sense that there's a fixed timing, fixed pickup and drop places, and fixed routes. That's been the traditional model and a BMTC monopoly. Today with technology, and which you're seeing in Uber and Ola and the various things, you can be flexible on all three. You can flexibly run different buses at different demands and time. You can have flexibly different pickup and drop points. So all the stuff which is rigid about the bus system can be flexible. They'll use the contract carriage thing. And there have been in Bangalore cases where these vehicles have been seized when they came up with the flexible system, saying not allowed. I'm fine. I'm saying not allowed is fine. But then you run it. Now you do it as a benefit. Flexibility to the customer is a good customer benefit. I don't care whether you do it, you run asset light, give it to somebody else, but run it under your brand. But you can't be the person who not only does not do it, will not also allow others to do it. So that's another example of archaic laws. Coming last to the point about what I would call some of the systemic measures, accountability in the system is non-existent. I mean, the High Court can call the commissioner and everybody else. Nobody will be held ever accountable. The system is beautiful in that way. There's multiplicity of agencies, multiplicity of things. Nobody is responsible because there is nobody who goes to sleep in Bangalore tonight saying this is my problem to fix. Nobody. I'd like to know who is the person who's going to sleep in Bangalore saying I own this problem and this is my problem to fix. Even when it comes to pothole and death, what do you see in the court every day? BBMP blaming BESCOM, BWSSB. They're saying that water caused the pothole puddle. I am not responsible, and that's the kind of thing that we go. Governments are inherently opaque everywhere. This is no different. So we don't have transparency. In fact, an ideal thing to do, those maps exist. Put out the entire urban commons of Bangalore on the net. Citizens will protect the lakes and the commons. Just mark out that this is the commons. And today technology has it, they have the information in-house, but there's an information asymmetry. He or she who controls that information is power. And then you have those transactions which get into a whole lot of this thing and the like. The last one or two points before closing is when it comes to now I have this other hypothesis. We get frustrated. Let me take some 3 or 4 examples that frustrate us in closing. We get frustrated that I segregate the waste, but it gets mixed in the cart in front. I'm sure many of us have that example and we get frustrated. It's by design. It's by design because it is set up to fail. The contractors do not want segregation to succeed because the model of garbage is essentially a transport model. X tons of garbage over Y distance is essentially where the monetization and the money is. Everything that segregates, decentralizes, and gets value from waste at a decentralized level hits the incumbents. And these have supporters across parties at influential levels. So while they may be in opposing parties, on business issues, they are together in the way they think about dealing with these kind of issues. Each takes care of the other's business interests. So you will never see a change. You may see usage of words like garbage mafia, etc. But they're all safe words to use because nobody is being named. But the reason it never gets fixed is, again, it has its patrons across the board. Take another thing about the road cutting, etc. I have a wild theory. I'd like somebody to disprove me. It's by design. Because the reason is, let's say I built a road. I am now BBMP. I built a road. I've obviously underspent. I've obviously, if an audit came, they will find out that there are many things wrong in this road. I'll have a deal with my counterpart in the other agency saying, boss, 5 days after I finish the road, please go dig it up for road cutting and water line and sewage. Once the person comes and digs, the audit cannot come and check and tell me that I'm wrong, because I can easily say, boss, the other fellow came and he did all this stuff. It was all perfect. But so I'm basically saying what looks like random, I think I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, it's all by design, that there's a well-honed system. I mean, I remember when I was looking at the data earlier, I mean, why do you think there's a fascination for road renaming? You go look at the records of the past. The same road as part of road works under the old name and the new name. And there'll be some 10 pages apart in the book. You'll never figure it out. But that itself is a 50% leakage, because the road is getting done only once. I have seen descriptions which says, while going from north to south, the right side of the road, and the same road being described while going from south to north, the left side of the road. Who is there to figure out right, left, north, south, etc.? It's done. Game over. So, and the last point I just want to make here, which makes this whole thing even more difficult to fix, is the rule of law, or respect for the rule of law. All of us in various ways are not necessarily abiders. I mean, we jump signals, so citizens are also to blame. But the point really is, we don't have a system by which you will take the people. I mean, in the US, for instance, on the IRS, if you found in the random thing to come up, it couldn't matter who you are. You go do a jail term. Then people realize that this is something I won't mess around with. But here we don't have that. And the more influential you are, you will start a drain cleaning project till it runs into a VIP residence. Then the project is over. So you see that across the thing, the rule of law is not uniform and the like. So these are just, these are roughly under 3 broad heads. I've got some 12, 14 points I've just thrown in there. And we could now, so the point, as I mentioned, is really to say, I'm seeing a lot of dejected faces. So now I'll give you the hopeful part of it. Okay, that there can be change. And so I don't want to sound like doomsday scenario kind of guy, which I really think is going to get much worse. We have not yet seen the bottom. That's my belief. But I'm also hopeful, because cities rejuvenate themselves. Cities do tend to fail. I mean, if you take the American Rust Belt, places like Pittsburgh, etc., it was not even livable at one point of time. Then it regenerated itself. So these are all organisms that in some crazy manner, I think a higher GDP is part of the answers, that some of this petty corruption will go away and it will get this thing. But there are green shoots that, and it is invariably based on some leaders, somebody giving us space to get something done in terms of, I spoke about all this. I was part of doing the self-assessment scheme back in 2000. And it's based on a basic premise that trust the citizen to tell the truth, then expecting a revenue officer to uncover a lie. And you reduce discretion in the hands of the officer. If you just went into a lot of rules saying, why is this discretion available to this person, you'll automatically start seeing that a lot of things become more citizen-centric in terms of thing. Lakshmi is here, Naresh is here. I mean, all said and done, the tender show roads and with footpaths and at least saying pedestrians are important. Even the Urban Development Department has recognized that Bangalore's model is out of 250 projects is listed as the top of the list, saying that pedestrian importance, this is the kind of project that other cities need to look at. So it's not that nothing is happening. Friends I know and people I know who know I do this, they say, boss, the city, is in terrible state. So I only reply back saying, boss, it would have been much worse if we were not involved. But I don't know, the jury is out there. Bangalore has more urban reformers per capita than any other city. I've worked in other cities. I've helped set up city connects in Pune, Chennai, Trivandrum and the other places. And I've engaged with people elsewhere. There is an energy. The tragedy of this place is there is so much of citizen energy and wanting to do this, an active RWA. If you had a matching partner in government, because I believe the way out is collaboration. We are in a collective hellhole and we need to come out of it together. And if we had a matching kind of reciprocity from the government side, we could work magic together. So that's really on that hopeful note, I shall end the first part of my monologue, and I'm ready to, we now do discussions among ourselves, plus I'm happy to intervene on any point on which I have anything more to add. Post the opening monologue, we had about 30 minutes discussion with the assembled group at the BIC amphitheater. While a lot of the anecdotal stories were related and discussed during that time, there were 2-3 issues that came up which were not covered by me in the monologue. And let me just summarize those aspects. One was the aspect of citizen participation. A lot of people felt that increased citizen participation is the way to go, and I'm in complete agreement with that. We are seeing of late the ward committee participation is improving on a monthly basis, and we need more of that to happen. So we already have an engaged citizenry in the RWAs and in individual citizens in Bangalore, and this is an area where if the government of the day, the politicians as well as the bureaucracy, genuinely believes in the wisdom of the crowd, there is a lot of things that can happen by enabling citizen participation. There is one aspect of the law that needs to be corrected. Currently, the corporator has veto powers on anything that is decided in a ward committee. That needs to be re-looked at, because if you want genuine citizen participation, veto powers per se don't belong out there. Another aspect that came up was whether Bangalore has exceeded its carrying capacity. The answer to that is clearly yes. It has overshot its carrying capacity. But the problem is that market forces are leading to an increased influx of people into Bangalore. So what does one do for the future? There is a possible solution in the neighboring area called Bayappa. This is the area around the airport, Yelahanka, that whole zone is called Bayappa. In geographic terms, it is an area close to over 800 square kilometers, which is larger than the BBMP area. So conceptually, we have the possibility of getting that area development right in terms of the lake bodies, the road infrastructure, respecting the gradients and the like. You could call it a kind of guided development of that area in a manner that the new city as it emerges is planned in a sustainable manner and planned far better than the way Bangalore has grown organically. So we have a chance of the Bayappa area being a good twin for what Bangalore is today. But if we don't address that issue proactively and allow the same haphazard development that has happened in Bangalore to happen there, then that could well end up as the evil twin. So these were the 2 points: citizen participation and what do we do about the excessive congestion that is happening in the city. And on an optimistic note, the gathering did feel, and all of them felt that this is the place that they would like to live going forward despite its problems. There is a positive attitude that we can overcome this and better days could happen. And I too have been an eternal optimist for over 2 decades of my own journey in this space, that if the politicians, the political leadership has the requisite vision, the administrative system shows the requisite firmness, and citizens play their role, then collectively we can jointly help build a better city, a better Bangalore in this case. Thank you.